Oh, I hate that American noise. Recording in progress. So Laura, over to you. I won't do any major introduction because you can do your own introduction. But firstly, thank you very much for taking the time to walk us through it. I think there's a lot of general interest in this as a topic. So over to you, and you can sort of fill us on what's going on.
No, perfect. Thank you very much. Yeah, no, thank you very much for inviting me to come and talk today. And I do really apologise for the technical issues that I had last week, but I'm glad to see you all here today. Obviously, because of the nature of the work that we do on the dockyard, I'm comfortable at sharing the sort of level of information that I've got up on the slides and where we go with the conversation. But I do apologise if I'm unable to sort of share any more detail at any points with you, but hopefully that won't be a problem. So myself, I'm Laura Franks, and I lead the energy services business within the maritime services sector of BAE Systems. And I've brought my colleague Ken Hobbs along today as well, who's our engineering and technology lead. So if there's anyone that has more technical questions, he will be more than happy to step in and answer them for you. The energy services team is relatively small. We're about 23 people strong at the moment, and we sort of have a sort of an energy services sort of consulting professional services capability that does anything from sort of energy bureau management to net zero carbon strategy. And then we also have a product side that looks at sort of smart energy management systems, things like our ship energy assessment system that we have, and we've got some other developing products as well. So I think both myself and Ken have worked on the naval base for the last 7 years.
Yeah, about 7.
Yeah, and I think that the reason why the energy team has sort of been embedded there was because of the amount of challenge around sort of energy and the work that we've been doing there over that time period. So hopefully we'll sort of step through a little bit of that today. But we both know the base very well, and we both worked with the MOD customer there for quite a while in various different roles as well. So I don't know how many of you have worked or are familiar with the naval base, but I thought it was worth just stepping through a brief snapshot of its history, because it really has a really rich industrial and naval legacy, and it's something that can't really be forgotten about. The site itself is over 800 years old, which is pretty outstanding, and is supposedly the longest serving or continuously serving dockyard in the world. So it's both been a position of strategic importance as a military asset, but also of great historical importance. And it's oscillated between a centre for shipbuilding and ship support, and headquarters for the Navy throughout that period in time. And today it's obviously continues its ship support side of things, and no longer does the shipbuilding. I think that it just, very quickly, there's not much left of the Tudor naval base as it was back then, that you can see today, certainly above ground, but there are remnants of things from the 1600s onwards, which creates, I think it's sort of a magical place to work, and I always call it an engineer's playground, certainly from a civil engineering perspective. The Great Stone Dock, as it was called back then, was replaced largely by one basin, which is the non-tidal basin that HMS Victory and Mary Rose sit next to today, and that really started the sort of the infrastructure and the estate large-scale development that we see today. You can see that moved into the 1800s, where the site was the largest industrial complex in the world, and the sail rope house was the longest building in Europe at the time as well. You then move on through the 1800s, and you get to the Edwardian era. Well, actually, before the Edwardian era, there's that second big development program, and that's where much of the estates that you see today, in terms of Three Basin, which is the large basin towards the north end of the dockyard, was constructed along with the other, which tidal basin and basin 2, which is now no longer non-tidal. I think some salient points to bring out would be Mark Brunel, so the father of Isambard Brunel. He actually designed the initial sort of the pumping system for one basin, and that at the time was a water wheel or a horse gin, and the remnants of that system are still there today, which we have to look after as a historic asset. 1906 was when the light and power station was installed, and that was expanded further in 1910. And that didn't just provide electricity to the naval base, but it also provided steam to the ships while they were alongside at that time. And I think it's worth noting that, in terms of the base provided steam to the ships while alongside then, just like today, they actually, most of the ships that come alongside, we connect to the shoreside power network as well. So we're a step ahead in some respects to the other ports around the UK. But very much looking at today's view, it remains a asset of key strategic importance to the Navy, and it becoming home port to the Queen Elizabeth class aircraft carriers has really sort of breathed a new life into the base. Actually from the time of the 1906 and the Edwardian upgrades that we see to really the mid 10 years ago, there wasn't any substantial investment of the base, and I think that was very much seen. It has over 600 buildings, it has 5 kilometres of waterfront, and has the largest private wire network in the UK, if not Europe. So I think it can't be understated, the size of the industrial scale of the naval base, but also the amount of heritage that sits within that as well. So just moving on, some of the challenges that has faced the base over the last 10 years. So I touched on the fact that there hadn't been much investment since the Edwardian period. But when it got named as the home port for QEC, it really sort of came into focus how they upgrade the naval base so that it can support the modern fleet of the Royal Navy. And the energy requirement of QEC and the want of the Navy to be able to plug her into the shoreside power and not let her run on her generators when she was alongside was a real driver for a number of the activities that went on. When looking at the energy challenge, you can't forget the sort of unique geographical location of the naval base. It sits within Portsmouth City, which in itself sits on Portsea Island, which is at the very end of the national grid. And at the time, sort of in 2010 to 2014, when we were really looking at the infrastructure upgrades that were required to support the aircraft carriers and upgrade the base, the energy and the electrical capacity within Portsmouth was of significant concern. And it was actually, it was forecast at the time that by, I think, present day, I think it was 2022, the report, that Portsmouth City was going to have reached their surplus capacity with electricity, which would have been a huge stifle for development. So I think that the Royal Navy, they really had 2 options. They either could leave the aircraft carriers to sit on their own engines, or they could do something about this. And they really started focusing on, self-generation to meet that shortfall. There were discussions at the time with putting in a new incomer from mainland over to the island, but the timescales to get that across and connected were, would not meet the arrival of both the aircraft carriers at Portsmouth, so they were eventually disregarded. And that's when they really started focusing on, not just self-generation, but also reducing our energy demand as well, because the increase of electricity was estimated at potentially being, twofold of what they were having in present time. So the graph that I've got in front of you now just shows that sort of stepped reduction in both energy consumption on the site and carbon emissions over the last 16 years. And I think this really paints a good picture of some of the work that was done, because as well as trying to understand how we tackle that shortfall and resilience issues for the naval base, there was a significant effort to reduce energy consumption where we could, through that sort of upgrade program of the facilities. So although the journey started before the declaration of the aircraft carriers, you can see that they were transitioning the original oil-fired boiler system to natural gas at the time. They were starting some behavioural campaigns, but actually there was still a significant amount of effort that they had to do. And I think a lot of that was initially driven through, or the business cases for those initiatives was driven through the establishment of the site-wide metering under the Energy Bureau service. So through collecting, a much more granular view of where the energy was being consumed, and that really paved the way to develop the spend to save initiatives around the energy programme, and some of them are more glamorous than others, but we did everything from replacing the majority of lights across the base with LEDs, BMS controllers. We put a small scale CHP in at the Temeraire swimming pool facility. A couple of the roofs were replaced with solar PV. And then, things like electric vehicles as well, although they increase the energy demand, they're the right thing to do. But I think that the main thing to note here was, the vast majority of those initiatives were enabled through that capture of data and that increased understanding. And we were able to then track the benefits of those initiatives through time as well, which has been really successful in paving the way for new opportunities as well. But all of this was done in the context of cost saving and energy consumption saving, rather than emission saving at that time. You can see the CHP coming online there, which it does increase the emissions slightly, but unfortunately was necessary to meet that shortfall in demand. And it's a 13.5 megawatt combined heat and power plant. And it's worth noting that the reason why we went and selected a combined heat and power plant was because there's still a steam district heating system there today. The boilers are about sized at about 20 megawatts. That system was initially put in to service the ships, but today services most of the buildings on site instead. And the strategy was, it's an electrically led CHP business case, but obviously, it has significant heat benefit as well, and ties in with the long-term strategy of converting that into a low carbon heat network, which really is just a low temperature hot water network around the site as well. So then tying it in with sort of the digital theme, I've sort of, we've done a play on words here with the sort of industry 4.0, but actually the naval base is pretty far behind when it comes to that digital transition. And I think the main challenges around that is the age of a lot of the infrastructure that we have on site. They equally have large power demands, but things like the saltwater systems, for example, our Edwardium, have mammoth industrial-sized pumps that go alongside them, and so that I think creates a unique challenge. It's not your normal infrastructure that we're necessarily dealing with across the dockyard. But I think that one of the other big challenges, and over my time with BAE Systems and working with the Ministry of Defence, you can see there's been a real optic shift, and I think a real sort of traction change around cybersecurity. But certainly 7 years ago it was difficult to get data back using a SIM card, even of water levels on the basin, as well as the electrical networks. So that has posed, a number of sort of barriers and hurdles that we've had to go over the last few years. But Naval Base Command are, this is a huge focus area for them, and they see a lot of benefit in driving this forward. And there's, a lot of activity going on to sort of define the long-term strategy for the digital dockyard going forward, and how we can really improve on these assets and how the site operates. So that's very much an ongoing program. But I think that, reflecting on some of the challenges that we've had as well, some of it's in trying to justify the business case, the investment case, and your return on investment for this data. Because actually, until you actually have the data and can start doing something with it, it's difficult to size the benefit that you're going to receive. And I think that another point is the cultural shift. The dockyard, there's a lot of people that have worked and almost lived on the dockyard for a number of years, and that's getting them to trust the data and to trust the technologies that you're putting in place, and make sure that that it's not not adversely impacting them, and that it adds benefit to what they're doing and the task in hand. I think that is a key challenge. But I think that over the next decade, I think the whole net zero carbon agenda, trying to make things more efficient, trying to reduce our use of materials and parts, I think that this will hopefully really start to lift the business cases around digital implementation and connectivity, and that we can really start making some additional progress. But some of the work that we have done to date, and can feel free to interject as you feel, but we've done quite a lot of BIM modelling. We used Esri models to sort of develop that single point of truth between our 3D BIM models, our SAP sort of facilities management system, and bringing in all of that data to create some really rich dashboards and interfaces for sort of engineers or users and maintainers to use. And although this hasn't been rolled out completely, it's sort of been in its trial phase, it's really sort of started to bring to life to the customer, to the end users, sort of the power that having all of this information can have in the same place. And if you just go back to reflect on sort of the age of some of the assets and the fact that we've had to effectively upgrade an Edwardian and Victorian naval base to meet the requirements of the modern Royal Navy, there are a number of assets that are beyond their design life, that, from a safety perspective, take a lot of very close management, and that by having these tools that you can overlay their safe to operate status, their materials state, their maintenance requirements, even things like their asbestos content, is hugely valuable. And from an operational impact, as well as a sort of health and safety and sort of intelligent decision making side as well. So we've also undertaken a number of trials around real-time analytics as well. Obviously, we've had the real-time analytics for the energy consumption side for quite some time, but we've been doing trials on the Edwardian pumps, so that we can monitor the temperature and vibration over time to start informing sort of predictive maintenance strategies. We've looked at asset tracking around the base as well. So brows, for example, so they're the gangways, that sort of sit between the jetty and the ship, and they're mobile assets that can sit around the estate, and I think we have something like 120 of them. So by being able to tag them with GPS trackers and understand where they are located around the yard, can save someone quite a lot of time at going out and trying to find them. We've done things like the water basin levels and being able to monitor them, and that's really important, both from an environmental point of view but also a safety point of view. Basically, prior to that, we still had someone going down and checking the water levels on an hourly, or I think it was a twice daily basis. But the reason why we need to manage them so carefully is that the water inside the basin, we try not to let out into the sea, but it also has a number of openings around the side of the basin, that means that you can flood some of the other underground assets if the water levels get too high, because it's non-tidal, and it can also affect the ship stability for any ships that are berthed within there. So you've got the safety sides and also the operational efficiency sides to those elements. We did some other things like the Cavitec boom, for example. So that is the power supply that goes into the QEC. Put some laser monitoring on that so that we could monitor its movement, because if the aircraft carrier is moving too much, it will come disconnected and potentially hit the Cavitec boom, and that can cause damage and maintenance costs, as well as potential safety concerns. And that's, I think, the trial of all of those has been seen as pretty successful. There's been some softer sides thrown into that, so like GPS trackers on buses, and environmental monitoring of meter rooms, but it's really paving the way for the future, and I think allowing us to start develop the business cases for the future, to really show the value in some of this data and what it can be used for.
Yep.
But sorry, Ken.
So the key element is combining lots of separate data and having multiple views of it, so that engineers can view it in their form, and different and managerial people can see the data in a different form and filter it to what's needed, and just having a central repository for future upgrades, so that as we're progressing, we track all the information properly and it's easily manageable. So as Laura said, there's a number of historic assets, so you need to know where you're digging before you go and hit something, and having a sort of 3D map of both the surface and subsurface information makes decision making much more quick and simple.
Laura, sorry, quick question. On some of this data, is it primarily focused on the facilities team, or is it, is it used beyond that in different ways? Just out of interest, really. I mean, it seems it's a really good sort of holistic view of what's going on in the naval base. I'm just trying to work out if it's just really from an environmental and facilities perspective, or if there are other departments that use the data for different reasons.
So, and this is where I think, trying to sort of working with KBS Maritime, who's now in post on the facility side, and the MOD to sort of build in that digital dockyard view, because there's huge benefit in creating and structuring this data so that it can be used by multiple stakeholders across the site. So if I can bring, one of those examples to light would be when a ship comes alongside, you can tell that it's there by, plugging into the shoreside power. And you can understand sort of from an operational perspective on a ship maintenance point of view, and refine your cost, for example, by understanding how long the crane's been alongside and what weight the crane's been lifting. And that information is both useful to the ship support teams and the facilities teams. And it's making sure that we're creating an infrastructure and a data lake in future that means that it can be, accessed by multiple parties and sliced and diced in the right way so that it's useful. And I think that when it comes onto a soft FM perspective, things like, the meeting room environmental modelling, you've got, things from a sort of a health and safety perspective there, and sort of making the environment a better place to work. But actually you can start tracking how often that meeting room is being used, when it needs cleaning, all of that good stuff as well. So there's plans at play for that, and there's very similar technology that we're developing and arguably is more mature on the ships as well with regards to all of this, which has similar benefits. When you look at the Royal Navy, the Ministry of Defence departments, and ourselves as the maintainers and support providers. If that helps.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you very much. Yeah.
No, that's okay. But I think that the biggest challenge the MOD has, though, and I think that we're sort of at the brink of being able to unlock that, is the cybersecurity side. And a lot of this data isn't sensitive, but it's the concern that if someone was able to access all of this data, what they could do with it, and what they could understand. And I think it's the unknown that sort of is the limiting factor to be able to sort of roll out and deploy that. But I think that both from sort of an industry in terms of their technical solutions, and also just the headspace of the MOD, it is changing quite rapidly. So I see that sort of in the next couple of years, that challenge will be unlocked, and everyone can start seeing and using the same data. And then the last one there is the operational efficiency side. So mobile working, is quite common now. We do it both on the facility side and the ship side. Arguably, I think we probably see more value from the ship side, but I think that's because a lot of the data, the electronic data, was in better formats to start with. And so, the engineers that go down to fix an asset can, see all the information on their phones, or the maintenance records, report back, stop work, all of that good stuff, all from their device. Understand sort of, I don't know whether, how many of you have been fortunate to have a trip on to the aircraft carriers, but they are huge. And being able to sort of have the details of how to navigate your way around, I think, has been really helpful on that side. And it's worth noting actually that we used our sort of virtual reality room to help train people to navigate the aircraft carriers as well, before they came alongside, so that our teams were sort of ready to go and understood how to navigate the ship and how to do their maintenance tasks. So I know that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour. So very happy to sort of take more questions. But I think, you know, the final note would be there's the naval base has been on a journey with regards to energy. It's certainly not finished, and I think the net zero carbon agenda has really breathed like a whole new sense of challenge, a real challenge into what the naval base is doing over the next sort of 10, 20, 30 years. Its internal ambition is to try and become net zero carbon by 2040, so to you know, achieve that status before the rest of the UK. It is the second largest emitter across the defence estate, so is seen as one of their key problem childs, and is a key focus. So the energy side of things is obviously continuing, and we're, you know, there's been hydrogen studies, carbon capture and storage studies, to look at, you know, what we can do. There's a number of photovoltaic projects going on at present. You know, one is a car park, and, you know, providing electric vehicle charging points to the workers on site. But actually the whole net zero carbon piece, it's not just the energy side, which I'm sure, you know, most people recognise, if not everyone on this course. And I think it's the digital enablement that I think is going to allow us to really maybe home in and tackle some of the scope 3 elements more. You know, mentioned it previously, but the insight of just being able to increase your operational efficiency, reduce your waste, reduce the maintenance, you know, you're reducing all the materials that you're consuming, and just becoming a more efficient and more, you know, intelligent operation will surely add a lot of value into how we can achieve net zero carbon. And that, I think, you know, creates a whole new imperative. Even when you're looking at that creation of the data lake that a number of parties can tap into and draw information off, I think it will really help to underpin those business cases and strategies.
Brilliant, thanks, Laura. So if anyone's got any questions, I mean, there's not many of us, so sort of by all means come off mute. I've got a quick one, if it's okay, another quick one. I've got loads actually, but just a very quick one. Edwardian pumps. This might be a really stupid question. Surely there's a benefits case to upgrade said Edwardian pumps to something a little more modern and useful. They're
very expensive to replace. I mean, the saltwater, so the pumps effectively pump the saltwater system, which is a series of culverts and penstocks that connect they actually connect the 3 basins across the site, and it manages all the various water levels. So the pumps are, you know, of mammoth proportion and scale, and have to move a lot of water around. You know, you can put in temporary pumps, but actually they're often less efficient than the big ones that you've got there. But if you think about the volume of water that you're looking at in terms of a dock, it's huge, and the connecting infrastructure that controls that series of water levels as well. You know, it's multi-millions. It would almost be, you know, a whole sort of rebuild of facilities if you were going to put in a different system.
Wow.
Brunel was a clever chap. Mark Brunel was a clever chap, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, amazing, really.
Sorry, another question. I don't know if anyone else has got any questions, but can you go back to the graph slide where you showed the sort of energy reduction? So the question I had was, I wasn't sure if the labels were associated with time, but I mean, what were the sort of main campaigns or projects that you ran that got the best benefit out of over the time? Just sort of trying to work out which one you got the biggest bang for your buck from with regards to, you know, it wouldn't be probably PV installations, but those sort of things.
If you're talking bang for buck, it would be CHP every time.
Okay.
13.5 megawatts CHP. Last year that saved £5 million.
Wow.
So you know, it's been a huge success. In terms of, but actually the behavioural campaigns, both from, you know, you can see earlier on there was behavioural campaign, but also from site metering, and that was, you know, using that data to engage with end users and remind them to just turn off their lights at the end of the day, and things like that. That actually you can see a substantial step change. And I think that it can't be underestimated, just reminding people to reduce their energy consumption, what benefit that can have.
Wow. So that's, sorry, that where it says behaviour campaign, that's the actual drop associated with behaviour campaign there, the fourth bar along.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes, that was earlier on in the process. Sort of was the main driver for that period. And then later on in sort of 2011-12, the site metering as well sort of created another drop through that sort of enabled engagement. But yeah, I mean, the CHP is definitely streets ahead. Everything else, LED lights have, you know, I think most places have done LED lights these days, but actually that's, you know, pretty good business case. Overall, I can't remember whether I said this, but we've had I think a 50% reduction in energy, but a 66% reduction in carbon emissions.
Interesting.
Which is not bad really, especially since we weren't focusing on carbon emissions, and I think is a great example of how you can reduce them. This was spend to save initiatives, but if you change the optics to carbon emissions, you know, I think that you know, it's not as daunting as people think.
I think also the site metering was one of the sort of most valuable elements we did, because that's giving us a solid baseline of where we are, and to move forward we need to know that, we need to track that over time, and it's still quite surprising that a number of large companies don't have proper monitoring.
Final question for me. You know, I've been on the base a few times, can't get a mobile phone signal for love nor money. How did you sort of overcome that? You mentioned there was some sort of problems with, you know, if you're putting loads of IoT devices around, there's obviously a lot of sensitivity around that. There's lots of big buildings and metal objects that are going to cause you a problem. I mean, how did you overcome that?
I'll leave that one for Ken.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, the mobile phone signals are a problem, but depending on which carrier you use, which location, you can get around that. But for most of the new sensors, and especially the mobile ones, we're using LoRaWAN technology, so it's long range wireless, which works remarkably well for small packets of information across the base. You know, it's commercially available now, and as long as we put our security wrapper around it, everybody's happy.
Brilliant, thanks, Ken.
I've got a couple of questions, if I may, Phil.
Yeah, please do, Simon. Yeah.
There's two connected, so I'll ask those in a minute. And the first one's a bit cheeky. Who's the first? Who's first in line in terms of emissions? If the dock is first, the second rather. Who's first? If you're able to say.
Oh, I think it's up in Clyde.
Okay, yeah.
The big naval bases. I think, to be honest, they battle it out for first place, but neither of them want the first place in that scenario. So yeah, but I don't think there's much in it, and I think I think Portsmouth Naval Base is definitely recognised across the certainly the naval estate, and I think the defence estate as well, as sort of being a front runner when it comes to reducing its energy consumption and its plans towards net zero carbon.
Yeah. So a leading light at the same time, trying to do the good. And then so the thing occurred to me, listening to what you were saying, is we had a talk a couple of weeks ago on the merchant city, as it's been called, at Fawley. And I'm wondering if there's some learnings both ways, actually, in terms of how they're using data to be more energy efficient. That's one point. And then the other is, you're quite close to the INEOS America's Cup team, and they're focused on benefits towards mitigating climate change, and particularly one of the things they've got to develop for the next CUP is a hydrogen fueled boat. And again, I don't know if there's any value in that. Just I mentioned those 2 points. That's all.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the note about Forley, I think certainly it's been on our list actually to engage with them. So following this, I might reach out. I haven't watched the presentation, so I might do that after this as well.
Yeah, it's really good, really worth watching.
Definitely. I think the hydrogen fueled boat, I mean, certainly. I know BAE Systems, when it was Land Rover BAR,
yeah,
we did have some relationships with the team. I'm not sure where they are now, but that's interesting intel. We are looking at sort of hybridizing Ally, and we've got some of our team supporting that activity as well, sort of looking at fuel cells, etc. So it is a piece of work that we are doing.
It was announced last week. The AC-37 as it's called, the protocol, and what was agreed in terms of how they will race. And one of the things, they're not allowed to have support. They've got to have hydrogen-driven support boats. And bear in mind, the yachts are about to go about 50 knots. They're going to be significant hydrogen boats.
Definitely something we can do. Good tip off.
Right.
Simon, do you know anyone there? Just if we could.
I can find out. I've got one of the guys I race with is actually part of BAR engineering, or whatever they call themselves. There was a spin-off of the first. They separated out some of the engineering into, I think it's called BAR. I know one of the guys there. I know one of the data scientists. So yeah, I can find out. Yeah,
because I think some of the work we are looking at sounds like it would be a similar size of boat as well. So that's cool. Interesting. We're sort of collaborating with our BAE Systems Inc. side. There's a team called Electronic Systems that sort of have done a lot of work around hydrogen and fuel cells in the past and presently as well. So yeah.
It's really early days, but I'll see what I can find out from my friend.
Yeah, no, fab.
Cool.
Hi Laura, it's Chris here. Brilliant presentation. Thank you for taking us through it. Really exciting to see what's going on there in the dockyard. I can connect you up with Forley Waterside. I know the team there quite well, so I'll take that as an action and make that introduction for you.
Really appreciate it, Charles.
And the other one that you should have on your radar as well is one just up the road called Lennox Point, which Portsmouth City Council are the developer on, which is on the Tipner site, but it has very similar ambitions with a skew on trying to get maritime SMEs and innovation and job growth for the maritime cluster as well. So that could have broad appeal in other parts of your company.
Yeah, no, definitely. In fact, we've got a workshop with Portsmouth City Council, I think in January, to look at sort of shared learning and sort of potential collaborations.
Cool. And final one is around hydrogen. We're part of a University of Portsmouth project with Portsmouth International Port. Mm-hmm. And it's also with a couple of other companies, Barter for Things, who are doing the LoRaWAN sensor piece. Yeah. Cox and Engas, who are providing the engine and the hydrogen catalyzer, respectively. And Iotics, who are doing a digital twin. Okay. But there could be some really interesting elements of crossover between your experience and the international ports, with a focus on air quality and improving the energy per nautical mile that you can do for support boats, because the focus is on swapping out diesel engines for a hydrogen engine on a support boat in the international port. So yeah, I'll share that detail with you as well. Could be some good learnings with the university.
Yeah, definitely.
Great, but awesome presentation. Thank you. Really, really pleased and glad your computer held up this time.
Yeah, no, I do apologise. I was probably a bit bitty because I had to run straight from the naval base to firing up the computer. So, but I think I've got everything in I wanted to say.
I've got another point which links. Mate, are you? So I was going to say, do you know? But let me state it. There's a project around drones called Open Skies. It's been run out of and I'm trying to think of the base on the Lizard, but they're running out of there to try and utilize the airspace and use drones for all sorts of things. So there's a company called Drone Prepper leading it. They've been involved in the delivery of supplies to Isle of Wight hospitals. They've been involved in the delivery of mail parcels at the Mullock and Tyre. So and then the open skies is really what are the needs of drone flying and drone delivery and things like that. I don't know if that's of interest. I just sort of put it out there only purely on the fact that there's a link between two naval bases.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think drone. So the way the Navy, we had some challenges using drones on the sites because of air control requirements.
Yeah, and that's one of the issues they're looking at.
Yeah, so I expect that they're probably leading the way then, sort of trying to tackle that problem. I think because we wanted to use them for a number of years, even just building surveys and ship surveys.
Yeah.
There's huge benefit to having them for just from that perspective.
Yeah, well, they're focused on getting supplies to places like parts to wind vanes out at sea, that kind of stuff. In fact, there's this guy at Southampton, Chris, you might know him at Southampton University, it's involved with as well. So there's all sorts of specialist skills around. But Open Skies is a project that's government funded, trying to pull it together.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's great the fact that they are focusing on this now sort of centrally as well, because I think that's the only way to unlock some of these, because otherwise you just keep on coming up against challenges. There was a demonstration a few years ago where we were looking at sort of how you can take parts to a ship that's deployed using drones and things like that. So it has been an area we've looked at before, but I don't think we're doing anything on it now at the minute. So it's good to keep it on our horizon.
Okay.
Hey, Laura, I've got a question. It's Alex Ridden here. Can you go to your Dockyard 4 slide, please? Because the conversations we've had here and the linking up is all very good, all very exciting, but it's to some extent kind of bounded problems, bounded environments. And of course, the dockyard is a massive but bounded environment. I'm quite interested in your breakdown on the right-hand side here, because if you think about what may start to become quite a problem, which is last mile electrical capacity across the nation, as more and more people move to EVs, if people start to use heat pumps with 1 kilowatt of electric in to get 4 kilowatts of heat out and so on, we're going to start to see not electrical generation problems and constraints, but actually physical wires under the street constraints going to people's houses.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about the charging of cars across the pavement. I'm talking about the real what goes between a substation and into people's houses here. And I'm wondering if there's some of the stuff you have been learning through what you've been doing on the right-hand side that could actually help the country at large when it comes to this last mile electrical distribution problem.
Yeah, I mean, the way that, because it is a big concern to the Naval Base, and I didn't touch on it too much, but it came into the strategy for the CHP in quite a big way. So alongside 13.5 megawatt CHP, we put in 3 megawatts of battery storage, and although that can be used to sort of optimize energy on site, the real reason why it's there is that basically if there was a power outage on the national grid, the Naval Base can switch into island mode operation. And it hasn't been completely rolled out. It's still sort of a project that's ongoing, but because as you can imagine, there's a lot of sort of technical complications that need to be solved to sort of make sure that that's all safe. But that's sort of the plan for the Naval Base, and I just wonder whether that is where, I think that depends on where we get to with nuclear power, I think, in the UK. Because obviously
that's on the generation side. It's actually that, as I say, the last mile type thing, a bit like we had with telco, with broadband.
Yeah,
right?
and I think that the reason why I raised that is because at one stage there was a big push to push towards local generation. And I think local generation would help. a lot with that, but you know, increasing the capacity that you have at the end of it is going to be, you know, a huge challenge.
I'd imagine a lot of the stuff you're developing in that simulation box could become very, very useful as you start to, you know, simulate what would happen in individual neighborhoods and streets and so on.
Yeah, and I think that when you start looking at it from a national grid perspective, it you know, it's not straightforward, and you know, a lot of those cables, you know, the material state of them, etc. It's going to be a huge challenge.
Yeah. Interesting topic though, thank you.
But no, I think you raise, I mean, that is going to be one of the biggest challenges, if not the biggest challenge. And I think it comes down to why we have to try and reduce our consumption, you know, regardless of transitioning to renewables.
So on the point you raised earlier on as well about the sort of the limitations of Portsea Island, effectively, is that, you said it was sort of approaching some sort of a few years ago peak capacity for Portsea Islands as a whole. Is that now gone away, or is the usage changing? What's the?
Yes, so largely gone away. In fact, I was asking this question to the City Council because obviously, because it's not an issue at the moment. It's not being discussed. I believe they increased the capacity of Incomer. But I think that, you know, there is still, you know, I think I didn't know who asked the previous question, but to your previous point, there are limitations in substations. So there are, you know, concerns around, you know, if you had local export, what is safe to actually export. So I think there's still a challenge around that, but I'm not up to date on the size of that challenge at the moment. But it's certainly not what it was, and the energy team at Portsmouth City Council, it's not the top of their agenda at the moment. I think it's largely gone away, and I think the new challenge is sort of increasing the capacity of the infrastructure that's here for the next challenge.
Perfect. Has anyone else got any other questions or points you want to raise? This is really interesting.
Roland here. A simple question, or two simple questions. I was curious, is there any projects being looked at to take advantage of your tidal and wave type energy generation and potentially wind? I saw you put solar in there, but you're sitting right next to water. Okay, it's not a massive expanse of water, but, and again, I don't know what generation electricity could be generated from the wave and tidal movements there, but I was curious if anybody's looked at that.
Yes, they did look at it previously, and it was sort of discounted because the technology wasn't efficient enough and it just wasn't really harvesting enough energy to make it worthwhile. We have actually, in fact, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, I put it on the to-do list of my graduates to just let's have another look at this, because I think that, you know, previously when we looked at it, it was in the optics of spend to save. But now that we're very much focusing on trying to be, you know, net zero carbon, it's understanding what small gains there might be, even if it was from sort of a shoreside capability point of view. And, you know, technology is just developing at such a rate at the moment. It is worth doing another dip check, but it might not be ready yet, I think. And you know, because of where the naval base is, the tides, you know, aren't as strong as you would get elsewhere as well. But, you know, it's a good question. In terms of wind, we did recently put up a small scale wind turbine. So depending on the success and the benefit of that, we will be looking at doing more.
And there was one I saw, I just Googled it, it was 2009, I think, sadly, so I don't know what's come of it, but Sainsbury's were talking about generating electricity as cars go into the car park and parking in the spaces, all that movement, kinetic movement from the cars sitting on plates, you know, they basically have to dig up the car park and put these special plates in, but it would generate electricity there. I don't know, I haven't seen anything since that story, but yeah, again, is that another route to doing it? You know, generating electricity, because I see all this, you know, obviously we want to save on electricity, but at the same time there's probably a point that we still need to keep generating, or, you know, sorry, reducing carbon, I should say. But yeah, if we can generate at the same time, that's got to be good.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that, you know, because a lot of those sort of ideas, technologies, they will be pretty low scale, but actually if they can power the lights, you know, in the vicinity or whatever, you know, it will make an impact overall.
Yeah, I think it was Microsoft that did this, sunk their data center into the, I can't remember, is it in England they did it? In
Scotland, North Scotland, yeah.
North Scotland, they sunk a whole data center there, and it was all powered by, but that was probably quite ferocious tides and currents that were generating there.
But I mean, the problem is with, you know, probably had quite a high, well, I don't know the case, but it might have had quite a high energy demand. So the business case to put in the tidal weighs up, stacks up. So that all needs to be considered. But those sort of localized techniques to sort of generate sort of localized assets, you know, if you can disconnect them from the grid, it starts helping your wider grid dependency problems as well.
It's fascinating, isn't it? It's like a little mini city of its own you've got complete control over, so you can try things and see how you get on to a large extent.
Now, Laura, I guess you have a lot of different nationality ships coming from time to time. And
yeah.
My wife and I used to get invited to wonderful cocktail evenings on various nations' ships. If you're allowed to tell us, which nationality are the most awkward and demanding when it comes to needing support?
Should we guess first? Shall we have a quiz? So we see.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I can say from my perspective, but that's just more of their impacts on the base.
It was a light-hearted question.
I think in terms of the impact on the base, as somebody that works there, it would definitely be the US.
Yeah.
So the ones having Thanksgiving right now.
Yeah.
I'll stop recording for international relations.
Yeah. Well, it could be the French. It could be French because of the nuclear submarine deal.
Yeah. But no, that's definitely from my perspective.
Perfect. We've probably overrun just by a minute or so. Anyone else got any other questions? Or Jeremy, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Yeah, Jeremy Reiter from CGI here. We're on the right slide. So I was intrigued because I've been involved previously in some of the asset tracking kind of projects that you were referring to, Laura, and it is amazing how much time and consequently money can be saved by just being able to track the locations of non-motorized assets. So you're not just spending hours driving around looking for things. And it's not, in the context where we did it, we actually used Sigfox rather than LoRaWAN, but nonetheless, it worked very, very well. But looking at some of those other use cases, and the ones that stand out particularly are automation and robotics and also the augmented reality. Those inherently are going to require more powerful radio bearers. And I didn't know, I'm thinking up the road, all of the big hype about Southampton having deployed their own private mobile network, which is 5G, whether you have any plans or aspirations to do something of a similar ilk in the port in order to facilitate those sort of much more complex use cases that are listed on the side there.
Yeah, so I think the augmented reality and automation and robotics, I think they will, well, they already are, they're being used on the ship side before the estate and facility side. And I think the business case is sort of stacks up there. You know, we have the automation and robotics within the logistics centre, but I think most logistics centres do. They are looking at 5G networks for the base, and I think that will be the solution sort of for the next phase of this development. But, you know, again, it's just getting around the cybersecurity elements of that before we get there. But I think it's definitely the future enabler for a lot of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that at CGI we're doing. There's a lot of focus on that area right now. Watch this space, but it's something that we're particularly interested in. So whilst appreciate not wishing to tread all over your patch, I suspect there may be an opportunity for collaboration. So if there's anything that you wanted to take offline and pick up that conversation, by no means wishing to push you guys out or anything at this stage. It's really just looking for opportunities where we can help solve problems. and I have no issues with doing that in partnership with other organisations like us and like you guys. So if we can help, we'd really like to.
No, perfect. Thank you very much. I can't.
Thoroughly enjoyable. Thank you.
So it's. I'll catch up with Ken. I'm sure he's making some notes.
I think we've pretty much timed out here. So, I mean, just by the way, thank you very much, Laura. That was really interesting, and I'm glad we finally got it working in the end. But yeah, if it's all right with everyone, and like I say, I'll have a chat with you separately, Laura. I'll publish this so people can catch up on it for people who couldn't make it this evening. If anyone else has got any questions, Laura, are you happy for me to share your contact details to people who attended, just in case they want to get in touch?
Yeah, that should be fine.
Perfect. Right. And Chris will follow up on the Forley connection and the other things as well. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. And Laura, thank you very much for your time. And Ken, obviously. And yeah, look forward to seeing how this develops over the next few years.
No,
thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Phil, for hosting. Take care.